Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome to this 46th session of the Platform Academy. Today, I am, just like last week, joined by my colleague Jason Lefever, and we will be talking about Process Automation Designer, which is the design interface for all of our cross-enterprise processes. We have talked about Playbook Experience last week, which is the user interface, the user-facing side of Playbooks. So if you missed that session last week, I encourage you to subscribe to the links and to check out the recording as soon as it's posted on YouTube next week. And to give a quick introduction, I think we'll let Jason go first.
Hey everybody, I'm Jason Lefever. I am part of the workflow automation product team and represent Process Automation Designer, Playbook Experience, and my larger team also represents Flow Designer, Legacy Workflow, Decision Builder, everything cool that we have going on the Now platform relating to workflow automation.
Awesome. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Jason, for joining me again today. I'm very excited to do another session with you.
The pleasure
My
is
name
always
is
Lisa.
Awesome. My name is Lisa Hohenstein. I'm an outbound product manager for the Now platform, and I specialize in the workflow automation product suite, and that includes Process Automation Designer, Playbooks, as well as Flow Designer and Decision Builder. I've been with ServiceNow for almost 5 years. I worked as a solution consultant in my first year at ServiceNow and worked for a customer before that. And with that, I'll go through a couple of housekeeping and general slides before I hand it over for the main topic of the day. As always, you'll probably already know this slide. We might hint at future features or upcoming releases. Timelines may change, scope of features may change, so please don't make any purchasing decisions based on anything that we say today. This is part of a bunch of more series, more webinars, more academies that are happening all across the platform. We have academies about AI, about analytics, as I said, workflows, platform, next experience, mobile, all kinds of awesome stuff. And you will see, you can get this. You can sign up for the other sessions as well. And I'll also have a list with links at the end of the session. And I think with that, I will hand it over to you, Jason.
Thanks, Lisa. Again, hey everybody. Today we're going to be talking about Process Automation Designer. This is one of the platform capabilities for workflow automation. This is a no-code builder experience for sequencing automations that power your business processes. So if anyone's familiar with Flow Designer is a low or no code experience for building automations. So you can build subflows, flows, actions, and these automations are reusable across any use case. Process Automation Designer is powered by flows, subflows, and actions. So as I build process steps, or what we call activities, these activities have automations behind them that power the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. So for any business process where I have multiple steps, where I may be engaging with multiple personas, multiple departments, Process Automation Designer is the no-code experience for building and empowering those business processes. We say no code because it is friendly for any type of persona, whether you are a pro developer that needs to support automated processes, or if you are a process manager or a business analyst, somebody that is responsible for defining, redefining, optimizing your business processes. There are capabilities here that help you to quickly automate your business processes. Let's talk about the vision. So we want to provide an experience so that you can visualize and manage your end-to-end workflows across business services. Again, I mentioned a whole bunch about how it is a no-code experience that caters to any type of persona. Before we jump into what we've recently been working on as far as new features, we want to raise a poll question, and the question is, if you're using Process Automation Designer today, how frequently does your organization use it to automate workflows? So Lisa, if you could launch the first poll question.
That looks good. Answers are coming in. And we have quite a few who haven't used it before. So it's great that you joined us, and it's amazing that you're here so we can teach you all about Process Automation Designer. I
Excellent.
do love the about a third of people who said, "Ooh, that we're just getting started." So some of the folks have tried it already.
Absolutely. And you know what, Lisa, I think that's going to have us call an audible here. When I go to the demo portion, I'm going to highlight more than just the most recent innovations. We'll do kind of a general overview of the capabilities within the builder so that people can get more familiar and then refer back to
Definitely.
this when they want to share this with their team members and respective organizations.
That sounds like a good idea. So I will let this poll open for a little bit and while you continue, and then I'll make sure to post any resources and getting started, links to training for those people who are new to Process Automation Designer and Playbooks so that you know where to go once you get out of this session.
Perfect. And Lisa, that's a great mention because we recently refreshed our fundamentals and introduction courses on Now Learning. So they have been refreshed to incorporate our Vancouver features. So Process Automation Designer and Playbook Experience were initially released in the Paris family release. So 2019, 2020 timeframe. It predates me.
It was
But
fun.
yeah.
I did the first knowledge labs for CreatorCon for Process Automation Designer, and it was really amazing to dive into a net new product.
Yeah, absolutely. Since then, we've doubled down our investment in the capability. So a lot of changes for anyone that has been with us for that journey. So we've invested heavily in the product and new capabilities. And most recently, we've been working on features based on customer feedback, based on internal BU use cases, and where our application teams want to go with the capabilities that they offer. One thing that we introduced back in San Diego was optional activities. Optional activities in San Diego were insertable in a running process. So these are activities that I could insert via an API. If I'm a user working in a playbook, let's say I'm responding to a case and there are things that I may want to add to my process sequence, I would be able to invoke a playbook or a stage action to insert optional activities. In Utah, we took our configuration experience of optional activities out of the list and forms experience and brought it into the pad designer. So that is a pattern that we are following over the course of time as we advance the product. We're bringing the old ways of building workflow. So I need to know about business rules and flows and form views, and I need to stitch them all together in a cohesive way to make a workflow. We're changing that, and we've introduced a new way to workflow, and that new way involves bringing everything process or workflow related into the same builder experience. So optional activities in Utah was one of our first kind of convergence opportunities. So optional activities can be configured directly in the pad canvas rather than in the list and forms experience. And then talking about our most recent release, Vancouver, we introduced a completely new view of building a process in pad, and that is our process diagramming feature. So we'll show that in the demo. I have a screenshot in a couple of slides. This allows you to view and configure your process in a diagrammatic way. So the initial release of PAD included a visual task board-like experience, so I could organize my process steps or my activities into stages. And now you can do the same type of configuration, but in a diagram view. And then our both of our capabilities, Playbooks and Process Automation Designer, we do ship enhancements via the App Store. And so in our November Q4 release this year, we introduced support for decisions within a process. And so we'll also demo how to configure a decision within a process definition. This will allow me to author decision branches. And so if I want my process when it's executing to follow a branch dynamically, depending on information entered in earlier steps of the process, the decision shape will actually evaluate the branching conditions and then follow the branching strategy that you've configured within the process.
That is the most exciting new thing I think for decisions in processes. I'm very excited for that feature.
Awesome. Awesome. Yep. It's available now. So if you go to the App Store, you need to be on the Vancouver family release, but look for Process Automation Designer version 24.2. That is the store release that contains the decision activities. And we always encourage customers to look at our latest family release, but also now that both Pad and Playbooks are on the App Store, go to the App Store and install the latest version of the app that's compatible with your family release. So be on Vancouver and then check out version 24.2 of Pad and Playbooks. All right, so let me go to the next slide. We're going to show a couple of screenshots before we go into our demo. So optional activities. What you see here is the Pad board view. This is the initial canvas experience that we introduced for building process definitions. You can see here I've got this swim lane at the bottom of my canvas. This is where you can insert your optional activities as you're designing your process. We support two types of optional activities today. Global optional activities, and what this means is any activity that's considered global can be inserted at any point in my process. And then we have stage-specific optional activities. These are activities that can be inserted when the specified stage is in progress when I'm running my playbook. The other option is that you can programmatically insert optional activities into a running playbook via a scriptable API. So if there's a scenario where you want to dynamically insert something into your running process, let's say you have some kind of approval request, the approval gets rejected, and you need to go back to a previous point in your process and complete a step again, you can programmatically insert the optional activity into your process to repeat the step necessary to ultimately gain approval and move forward with your process. And then process diagramming. So for anyone that joined us at Knowledge this year, we showed process diagramming all over the place. And so this is the new way to workflow. So a consolidated experience for sequencing and building your process automation, bringing together the configuration experiences for anything related to process. So, what we envision are things like a forms experience. So if I have a step that's going to present a form, how do I do that today? I'd have to go to the form view and configure it and then save it and then come back into Pad and reference it. That's the old way to workflow. The new way is that you will have a soft exit ramp into your form builder, and then you can immediately consume that form view within your process. So you're not leaving your process context in order to configure all these other things and then stitch it back into your process. It's a consolidated, seamless configuration experience. Process diagramming was introduced in our first Vancouver store app. So if you are in the process of upgrading to Vancouver, I just made a plug for our 24.2 store release, but this is included in our 24.1 store release and every release after that. And then decision activities, you can see here in the screenshot that we've got a diamond shape in the middle of our first stage. This is the way that we configure decisions and then route a user through specific decision branches as they execute a playbook. So we'll go into that momentarily with the demo. I'm going to pause there before we jump into my instance and see if we have any questions that we should call up here live, Lisa.
Yeah, that sounds good. So a couple of people asked for the links that I posted. One of the questions is, can Pad be integrated with project or demand management? So for example, decisions or actions that are associated with projects.
That is a great question. So when Process Automation Designer was initially released, there was some level of control over which tables you could use to trigger your processes. It was called the trigger license table. With our Utah patch 7 and our Vancouver patch 1, we removed the trigger license table. So
My favorite news this year.
if you have access to the tables that you just referenced, you can trigger them. You can use them to trigger processes. So all you need to do is come into Process Automation Designer. If you're on a pre-Vancouver instance, then you'll need to activate the pad plugin. If you're on Vancouver or later, the plugin is activated by default. So open Process Automation Designer. When you start to build your process definition, it will ask you to specify the table and the record operation that will trigger the process. So you can either define a custom trigger, or you can define one on the fly. So you can say when a record is created, when a record is updated, or thirdly, when a record is created or updated, it will trigger this process. And then you specify the table where the record will come from. So if you have new demands or new projects, etc., you can reference those tables to trigger these processes.
Sounds awesome. One shout out I want to give is we have many other teams in our different business units who also create playbooks. Most of them should be available through the ServiceNow store. So if you're licensed to any of those products like CSM, you might want to go check them out. And then if you have the license for those products, you can just go and install and customize those playbooks for your needs. If you want to, you can also create playbooks, process definitions for any of your own processes. Process Automation Designer itself does not incur any extra license. You just need to be licensed for the tables that you're working on.
Exactly.
Awesome.
One thing that we'll plug right there is you made that comment, Lisa. We have some demo content on the App Store. So there is an app called Process Automation Experience Demo. And this comes with 3 example processes. There's an incident response demo, there's an application approval demo, and then there's a Playbook Experience demo, which I think is on the interaction table. Not only do we have the process definitions pre-built, we have an example workspace so that when you create any of these records, you can view the running playbook in the demo workspace. These aren't intended for production. This is just really some demo content so that you can get your hands dirty and become accustomed to how processes work, how playbooks work, and how they work together. So definitely encourage you to check out that store app as you get started.
Awesome. Thank you. One more really good question from the Q&A panel. Maybe you can give some recommendations on when we should use pad versus flow.
Absolutely. So flow, when you have something that's a self-contained automation, I'm seeking an approval, I'm sending an email, I'm calling an integration. Those types of things we describe as Lego blocks. So you might be able to seek an approval in multiple business processes. So how can you build, a custom approval action or a custom subflow that does something, and then reuse it across multiple use cases? A process is like taking all of your Lego blocks and building something out of it. So I would say, if you're thinking about building a process that has multiple steps, may involve multiple personas or multiple business departments, that's the use case for Process Automation Designer. If you've got a self-contained automation that's really a couple of steps, then use a flow or a subflow.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely great question.
More questions, please put them in the Q&A panel and we'll address them when we can.
All right, at this point, I'm going to jump into my instance and we will do a walkthrough of Process Automation Designer. So we're going to navigate to Process Automation Designer. For anyone that was with us last week, or if you weren't, we dove into Playbook Experience. You do not need to have a Playbook Experience associated with your process, but we found that many people do implement end user facing playbooks that are associated with their processes. This is the UI component of a running process. And so anytime you have a user that needs to complete work in order to achieve a business outcome, that's why you have a playbook. So that's part one. This is part two to complete the picture of what powers a playbook. So I'm going to go ahead and open one of our demo processes. We'll get a look at the overall builder, some of the interaction, and then I'll highlight the most recent features, optional activities, diagramming, and decisions. So processes are organized into stages. So the columns here represent process stages. These can be delineated by similar groups of work. So if you have steps for the identification stage of incident response, similar things to really figure out what the nature of the incident is, you group those steps into a stage. Another way that you could interpret stage delineation would be if work changes hands into different teams or different departments as you progress through the process lifecycle. So we've organized 4 stages into this demo process. Each of these cards represents an activity. These are process steps. And behind each of these process steps is an automation. So we mentioned before that Flow Designer powers our building blocks. Each of these process steps or activities is a building block. You can see that this confirm contact details step is powered by a subflow. If I ever want to look at the subflow, I can go to Flow Designer and see what automation is powering this step. This board view offers drag and drop capabilities. And so if you are really kind of sketching out your process for the first time and need to move things around, the board view allows you to drag and drop to determine the appropriate order of the steps that should take place in your process. You can configure start rules. So as you execute your process, the steps and the stages can execute in a perfect linear sequence. So you can see here that our
impeccable
stages...
timing. I'm sorry, but impeccable timing. We just got a question about how to conditionally launch activities. I'm sorry.
Awesome.
Go back
Awesome.
to it.
So what I'm about to say about stages also applies to your activities. So we have configured this to run linearly. So the first stage runs when the process starts, and then each subsequent stage runs after the previous stage. So you can see here that this logging stage starts after identification. But it is possible to configure a stage to run in parallel. So if I were to change the stage 2 properties to run when the process starts, then that would mean stage 1 and 2 will be in progress as soon as my process triggers. So it's possible to run things in parallel, and it is also possible for subsequent stages or activities to wait for the completion of multiple activities. So let me just take a look at one of these. You can see here that I have the 3rd activity in my first stage. If I wanted this to wait on both the completion of 1 and 2, and maybe I have these 2 running in parallel, I can update my start rules to refer to any of the previous activities to kind of have these diverging and converging paths. And this will become even more apparent when I flip over to the diagramming view. That shows nicely when you have things running in parallel versus in a linear sequence. The other thing that I want to touch on based on that question is that you can configure run conditions. So this also applies to stages and activities. I'm going to click on the show additional options here in my configuration side panel, and you can see that we've got a couple of run condition options. So the first is a start with delay. So if you want to delay the run of your stage or activity, you can specify an explicit duration, a relative duration, or a percentage duration. And this will delay your stage or activity from running until the point that you've specified. So an example that I always use is, let's say we've just closed a case and we've addressed either a new business service request from a customer, or maybe there was an issue and a customer initiated a case for support, and then you've closed it. You may have as your last step a follow-up survey. So how did we do? Let us know how we can improve. You may want to delay sending that survey request for 24 hours, like give the customer some time to, get back to work after their issue was resolved, and then follow up within 24 hours with this survey so they have the opportunity to give you feedback. You can build your delay into your activity or your stage so that it meets your business requirement. The other thing that you have available is a run condition. So if you want to specify conditions that need to evaluate to true in order for your stage to run, you can do that. And one example would be, let's say I have a stage, our application approval demo process has an approval stage and a rejection stage. So the use case is I'm applying for some kind of line of credit or a credit card. It's a financial services type of use case. You may have a stage that runs through a sequence of steps when the user is approved. And then you would essentially configure a run condition on the stage that looks for the approval step and the result of the approval. So if my approval request is approved, then run this stage. If it's rejected, run the rejected stage. So you have the flexibility to dynamically run or skip stages and activities in your process based on what's happening within the process itself. Lisa, I'm seeing some hands being raised. I'm seeing some chat. Do we have anything you want to address?
We have a couple of questions that came in the meantime. I answered as best as I could, but maybe you have extra input. One of them is PAD looks very similar to lifecycle events in HRSD. Are they related?
They yes and no. So we are working with the lifecycle events team. The plan is to eventually power lifecycle events with Process Automation Designer. So that is work in progress. Lifecycle events does make use of playbooks, and so for some of their end user experiences, they will run playbooks, but they are different technology stacks that we are working over time to bring into one consistent configuration experience.
Yes. That is awesome. That is pretty much also what I wrote. A great question. One person, we just talked through this. So it was not just the question for conditional activities, but also the comment that PAD is great. So yay.
Love hearing that.
Exactly. I think we talked through most of them. One was a special question about a problem in a PDI, but that might be a good chance to again call out if you want to try this out and you don't want to do this on your company instance. You can get a personal developer instance on developer.servicenow.com. Install the plugins for Process Automation Designer, Process Automation Content, Playbook Experience, and play around there. Test it out. There's also training, as we outlined earlier, on Now Learning, where you can get your hands on PAD and Playbooks.
Awesome.
More questions. Yep. Wait, more questions. Can Playbook loop? So repeat rollback to a stage.
That is coming.
It's Safe harbor.
Yeah, it's interesting that Lisa and I were chatting before the webinar, and I said, I have so much stuff that I would love to demo right now that's coming, and so we're going to try and get back into the Academy schedule as soon as possible. That's coming, so yes. Stay tuned. We will get back on that as soon as we can share it.
Yes, and then another question. So PAD conditions can be dynamic calls. So yeah, you can dynamically reference previous activities output and
exactly.
work with those.
Exactly. So that segues into the next kind of general overview demo topic. We ship several out-of-the-box activities, and some of these are based on the like write operations to the parent record that triggered the process. One of our commonly used activities is called user form. This allows you to collect inputs from your user in the playbook. You can either expose a form view and present a number of different fields that are in that form view, or you can specify the fields one by one that you want exposed in this step. And what that will do is it will collect inputs. Those inputs will be stored against the appropriate variables in the record table. So for example, our first step of the process is to confirm contact details. And when we run the playbook, it will ask me which channel did the caller reach out by. So I have to choose email or chat or walk up, and that will write back to my incident record. And then what I can do is reference that input later in the process. So we have complete support for data flow throughout the process. Another way to do that, use data flow, is to collect user data. So this is for data that's not going to be persisted against my parent record. Let's say I need to collect an address. And so later in the process, I'm going to be shipping something to that address. I might expose a custom data definition that stores that address, but we're not necessarily persisting that against our record itself. So that allows you to collect arbitrary inputs and then use those inputs later in your process should you need to reference them. So great question. We support data flow end to end and a number of different approaches. Some of our other out-of-the-box capabilities include instructions. So if you need a user to do something, maybe in another application, and you haven't integrated it with your workflow, you can present an instruction that tells the user what they need to do, and then they can acknowledge that it's done. We have a number of different create record type of activities. So one is an out-of-the-box create task. We have a create record. These are interactive, so it will present a UI to the user so that they can specify attributes about the record or task that they are creating and then actually generate the appropriate record. We also have non-interactive activities. So if I want to automatically create a record without exposing a UI to the user, I can do that. We have automated create, automated update, and then a number of other things here. So if I want to send emails or show a knowledge article or whatever the case may be, we do have a number of different approval steps that we ship in our process automation content app. And then Lisa mentioned that across our applications, ServiceNow ships several out-of-the-box playbooks. All of those are going to contain out-of-the-box activities that were customized to the application use case. All right, so let me not waste too much more time. I love talking about this stuff, so I could go on and on. Our features that we highlighted as recent features. So we have this switch within our board view that allows you to turn on your optional activities view. This is the same thing that you saw in the screenshot. So I have this swim lane that opens that allows me to configure global optional activities. So I have the same picker here that I can insert global optional activities, and then I can add stage-specific optional activities where it's warranted. So before, you had to go find the process definition list on the list in forms classic UI navigation. You had to add an activity to the process definition there, and then you had to give it a manual start rule. So it wasn't a great configuration experience. This enhancement, again, brings configuration in list and forms into the pad canvas so you can do more work related to your process in one place. So that's optional activities. And then drum roll, please. Here is process diagramming. So this is the same process definition, but in a different view. So, if I have a process that has decisions or it has multiple things running in parallel, perhaps the board view is not going to intuitively kind of help me understand the nature of those details as much as a diagram would represent. So this really gives the process author options. So you can configure a process in the board view because it's simple and you can quickly get an understanding of what the process contains, or you can do in diagram. Whichever is more comfortable for you, you can use these views. There's parity between the both of them. So you can see here that rather than having the column orientation, we've got these larger boxes to represent our process stages, and then each of these tiles within the stage represents our activities, our process steps. So you can see that we've got a linear sequence in my first stage. In my second stage, this is where I've got a decision. So let me quickly talk about how decisions work. If I need to add a decision to my canvas, I can add a plus here. So hover within your stage and you see these pluses. These are where you can add things to your process. So you can either add another activity, you can add a decision, or you can add a parallel path. We have a decision here. And so the way that I configure decisions is I will first provide basic information like a label, a description. I can give it the appropriate start rules, and then I define my branches. So in this use case, we are going to treat our process execution differently for the different priorities that my incident could be, the different priorities that could be calculated for my incident. So just as an example, I've configured 2 different branches that represent what happens if my incident is a P1, so this is a critical incident, and then if I have a P2, so a high priority incident. Each of these branches has the ability to label, and then you specify the condition. And what I've done here is I have dot walked to my trigger incident priority. So you can see here I'm using the dot walker. I can kind of scroll to the priority, or I can actually search. So if I want to search for priority, it will do the dot walking for me. So I've pill picked to trigger incident priority, and then we've said that if it's critical, we want to follow this path. I did the same thing for P2s. You could do the same thing for all of your priorities if you want to treat each priority differently. And then one of the options that becomes available when you have at least 2 branches is you get a processing approach. So by default, the decision will process the first branch that evaluates to true. And when you have 2 or more defined branches, you can process any and all branches that are evaluating to true. So it really gives you some flexibility in how you can dynamically route your user and your process execution through certain steps, depending on information collected as you progress the process. And then each decision shape comes with an else. So if there are scenarios where you want to route to an else branch because none of the branches evaluate to true, then it will proceed accordingly. So I'm going to pause to take a quick drink here. Let's see if we have any questions.
The obvious question just came in. Can PAD use Decision Builder?
So it can.
Safe harbor.
It can, and I'm not going to talk safe harbor quite yet. Let's talk about how this is done today. So it is possible to call a decision table from Flow Designer, and what you can do is reference the decision table and then render a decision within your flow. And then you can, if you have a subflow built, each process step can be powered by a subflow or an action. You would create a subflow that leverages the decision table and renders the decision as an output. And then you can create an activity definition. So an activity definition is a wrapper for your automation, so your action or your subflow. And then if your process step renders a UI, it has the experience properties that will present that UI in a playbook. So today, the configuration experience requires you to make a subflow that calls the decision table and then reference that subflow in an activity definition. So there's some additional configuration required. in the future, we're going to work on how to bring those two together more seamlessly. So if I have a generic decision activity, can I just reference a decision table directly? So that work is coming. And for now, there are just a couple of additional configuration steps to make it possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much. One note
Absolutely.
for these, if you do have the subflow with the decision, make sure to have your decision outputs mapped to subflow outputs, because all of the outputs that the subflow hands over to the activity definition will be available for activity or lane conditions, as we saw earlier. So all of the subflow outputs will be activity outputs.
Yep.
Cool.
All right, a couple more things about diagramming. So, excuse me for my coughing here this morning. We have some validation rules that we put in place for the diagram. So let me force some errors here. So we have these connectors here, and if I was to delete a connector, you can see that we've got some colors showing up. And additionally, we've got this error tray at the top of our header here. What this does is it shows me as the author anything that I really need to think about or fix before activating my process. And a yellow warning is kind of a soft warning. It won't prevent me from activating and using my process. Basically for this, because stage 1 is missing an end connector, this won't stop me from activating my process, but what it will do, it just lets me know that after stage 1 is done executing, the process will stop because it doesn't know where to go next. Now with stage 2, we're missing a start rule. So this stage doesn't know when to begin. So this is a hard warning and it will prevent activation of my process. So I need to give all of my stages at least a start rule in order to be able to use my process. So the fix here is to simply drag a connector, and you can see here that my validation tray has been cleared out. Let me show you a couple of cool little tricks. So if my process has, let's say, a bunch of errors, all of my errors will be visible here in the tray. And then where we can navigate you to the configuration property, you can actually click from the error tray. So what this does is it opens up the specific property that's missing, and it will allow you to fix it. So I'm just going to have stage 2 start after stage 1 again, and you can see here how the error tray was cleared out because I've resolved the errors. If I have any activities that are missing inputs, that will be another thing that throws some validation errors here. So you can see here that I've got multiple errors found, and what this is looking for is just the required inputs. So when I have a user form, again, that is for writing values to my trigger record or any record that I specify in my running playbook. You need to reference a table. So we need to know which table are we writing values to, and then within that table, which record are we writing values to. So you'll see some kind of helpful hints here to make sure that as you're authoring, you are completing all of the required fields in order to make use of your process. Something else that was introduced with diagramming, undo and redo. So you can see up here, we've got an undo and a redo button. This allows you to track changes within your current application, your browser session. And then if you do something that you didn't intend to do, you can undo it, and then you can redo. So you can see here, undo, redo. So that's a cool little enhancement that assists with your configuration tasks. And then let me show one more thing. So if I want to change my start rules, I showed you how you can do it in the configuration side panel. You can also actually redraw your lines in some cases. So if I want stage 2 and stage 1 to run simultaneously, I just redrew my connector here, and that essentially updated my start rule so that my stage 2 starts when my process starts. So you can redraw your lines here in order to appropriately sequence your stages and your activities. Excuse me. We do not yet support drag and drop in the diagram. So that is a coming feature, not yet available. Just wanted to call that out. Let me pause once more and see if we have questions. Any questions?
I don't think no new ones. Nope.
All right.
Oh, there's one coming. Versioning, question mark.
Versioning. Okay. So we do not support versioning per se in Process Automation Designer today. You do have this concept of a draft process and an activated process. So if something is in draft that you're not yet ready to activate and make use of, it can stay in the draft. We also have snapshots. So every time you activate in the back end, we take a new snapshot of your process. You can track versions via source control. So if you use various source control applications or capabilities, you can track versioning within source control. But as far as authoring workflow and versioning, not just yet. It is an idea on our roadmap. We just, we have tons of things that we're excited to do with this space. And so haven't yet got to that.
So much to do, so little time.
Exactly. All right. Other questions?
It looks quiet.
All right. Well, yeah, this was meant to be kind of an intro to Process Automation Designer. Again, we're going to have you walk away with our COE links, which contain, pointers to our learning modules, pointers to any recent knowledge labs that are available. Lisa does a fantastic job of curating content with best practices relating to not just Process Automation Designer and Playbooks, but also all topics relating to workflow automation. If you missed our Playbook Experience Academy from last week, we definitely encourage you to go review the recording as soon as Lisa makes it available, because it is the other side of a process, the UI side of a process. So we always split this into two parts just because there's so much content to cover. But that is definitely encouraged as well. Let me jump back into the presentation so that we can cover our final slides before we close out for today.
We have another poll.
So based on what you've seen, what are you most excited to use? And we give you 3 options, so you can choose optional activities, diagramming, and decisioning. But if there's anything else, because you're just learning about PAD today, as we walk through the demo, feel free to put that into the chat if there are additional options that you want to let us know about. Yes,
please. Let us know what you think. And we have a very clear front runner in process diagramming. And I absolutely agree. It makes it, for some processes, it's really nice to work step by step, go through your lanes and add the things. But sometimes you just need the big picture. And then diagramming is amazing for that.
Absolutely. Another plug for some of our out-of-the-box process activities. I know that our regulated markets, our financial services industry teams, they ship some rather complex playbooks that are available via our app store. So if you're licensed to use any of our financial services applications, there's one out there for responding to fraud cases. That's a very complex process that gives you a starting point. And so if you need to be compliant in a regulated market, take a look at some of those out-of-the-box processes and playbooks to give you a starting point for responding to business critical situations. Another one to call out is in our source to pay space. So supplier lifecycle operations has a number of out-of-the-box processes and playbooks for different supplier lifecycle scenarios, onboarding, different source to pay type of purchasing scenarios. And then the sky's the limit. If your use cases require different types of workflows, you can use these capabilities to support whichever workflow requirements you have.
That sounds awesome. I threw the general link to the store in the chat as well. So if you haven't checked that one out yet, please go ahead and do that. Uh, I think we answered most of the questions. We had some really good questions today. Thank you so much for being such a lively crowd today. Some really good questions and interest in this session. I want to leave you with some more links. Some of these you've seen. You'll also find the overview of all of these academies at sn.org/academy. Which will link you to a community post with all of these. I'll hope you check out all of the other great content that my colleagues put out. And I think with that, what I have to say for today is thank you everybody for joining us. Thanks for an amazing Platform Academy year, 2023. We had some amazing sessions this year with great guest speakers. To those that I don't speak anymore, I wish you happy holidays and a nice quiet time. This is the last session for this year. Starting next year, my wonderful colleague Tara Fisher will take over this Platform Academy, and I, for myself, will spin off a Workflow Academy from this series. So keep in mind sn.works/Workflow Academy. So there will be a dedicated academy about all things workflow next year, and we'll cover best practices, guidance, tips and tricks, and also some how-tos, and run some AMA live streams where you can join us and ask us questions about workflow automation on the Now platform. And that is about all. So thanks again, everybody. Thanks for
Yeah,
joining.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jason, for joining me last week and this week. And hope to have you on my academy next year.
You know, I'm always in for it.
Awesome. Wonderful. Everybody have a wonderful day, rest of your day. Have a wonderful weekend and wonderful rest of the year. Bye.
Take care.